So welcome to the latest in a series of the development and support webinars developed by the NIHR Academy. My name is Martine Scannell and I work in the NIHR Academy as the Development and Support Manager. This webinar, Building Strengths in My Team, is delivered and in collaboration between the NIHR Academy and Oakridge, one of our leadership development programme partners. This webinar will be facilitated by Mark Blanchard and Joe Clare, both senior consultants at Oakridge, who have extensive experience in behavioural and cultural change and are passionate about helping people and teams to achieve their full potential. So Mark, I will now hand over to you.
So understand the benefits of working with strengths to drive performance. So that's strengths focus. We're going to share some example exercises that you can do to identify both your own strengths and also the strengths of your team. And finally, sharing a framework that would help you optimize that individual and team collective strengths in your team. So with that, I shall hand over to Joe.
Thanks, Mark. So I'd like to start with getting us thinking about a definition for strengths and what do we mean when we say strengths. So just like to hear from you in the chat, maybe, what's coming to mind for you when we talk about the word strengths? And Mark, just while we're waiting to hear from the audience, anything coming up for you?
I think for me, when you say strength, it's something that I may be recognised for, something, I feel I've got a high level of proficiency. So I suppose if I'm getting feedback from somebody, then I'd identify some strengths, what do people kind of say about me? So it's those kind of knowledge and those kind of skills that's kind of what springs to mind for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anything coming up in the chat so far?
So we've got Serena, something you can do well, something that comes naturally. So thank you. Catherine, something to feel confident in. Fantastic. Thanks, Catherine. Anybody else got any thoughts when we say strengths?
Okay, let's move to a formal definition then and just see how that perhaps compares to some of the words we're hearing right now. So this definition comes from Bruton and Brook, who are both business psychologists, and they developed the Strength Scope set of tools, and they're specialists in working with strengths. They've been working with strengths since kind of the early 90s. And what they define strengths as is underlying qualities that energize us and that we're great at or have the potential to become great at. And I think the words we've heard already, confidence, things that give us confidence, things that we're naturally good at, certainly resonate with this definition. And often we think about strengths being similar to competencies, and there is a difference. And whilst they both focus on behaviour, competencies are a combination of our skills, our knowledge, our experience, habits that can be learned and that are required to demonstrate behaviour. Whereas what we're talking about when we're talking about strengths are those elements that arise from our personality, as we heard in the chat, the things that come more naturally to us, the things that are more innate. It's a way of doing, a way of feeling, thinking and relating. Of course, they're visible in our behaviour too, but perhaps the key differential here is the ability to recognise that energising quality. So a competence we might be good at, we might have learned to a really great skill, but it might not be that thing that energises us. Whereas if it's a strength that's innate and natural, it gives us that sense of energy, of being in flow. We lose track of time when we're using our strengths at work. It's that feeling of having a great day. As I say, the things that are maybe more learned competencies are things that we have to do to get by. We know we can do it, but it's perhaps the thing we prefer not to do, or the things that we might put off, the things that potentially have a bit of a draining quality for us. Example, I've got a real clear strength in relationship building, so hence the work I do. I love coaching, I love doing learning events, working with groups. I don't have a natural strength of detail orientation. but I've had to learn that to complete program planning, design, budgets, and I'm pretty competent at it, but it'll often be the thing that I leave, I kind of procrastinate on and leave a little bit as a last resort. What about you, Mark? Anything coming to mind for you? Any natural strengths that give you a real energizing quality?
Well, I'm a scientist, so I've got a natural nosiness and a curiosity about how things work. So what I actually find is that a natural one might be empathy. So I get quite a lot of feedback from folks I work with, folks I spend a lot of time with, that I'm quite empathetic. And I think the reason it energizes me is because the empathy drives the curiosity of understanding how things work, how things don't work, why people think things in a different way. And that gives me the energy because I'm just naturally a very nosy person.
Great, yeah. So again, maybe reflecting right now on things that you recognise absolutely energise you, that you would say are your innate strengths, and maybe some of those non-strengths, the things that you know you do, perhaps you do them well, but they're perhaps the things you're not preferring to do. And pop them in the chat and we can have a see what's coming up for us today. Before we look at that, though, I just want to share with you the StrengthScope model around peak performance. And they talk about 3 elements to peak performance. They talk about kind of having that organizational goal or the departmental goal or even the individual goal, that direction that we need to work towards. Having the right competencies, of course, the skills and the knowledge and the experience to do our work. But where we really get to peak performance is if we're using our strengths and energizers to really boost and power up and supercharge that performance. So this is the model we're kind of working with. So again, Mark, just do a quick check-in. Anyone sharing their strengths and non-strengths with us in the chat at this point?
The couple of additional ones from the first question was that skill or talent, maybe a trait from Emma, and being highly productive being a strength from Member A. So
yeah,
that's a couple of things that we've got in the chat so far.
Fantastic. Okay, well, we'll share some questions to help you uncover those core strengths in a while. But first of all, let's just have a look at what other benefits, as well as that peak performance, what other benefits do working with strengths bring us? So we've talked about that feeling of competence. So yeah, we are competent because we're naturally great at it, or we have the potential to be great at it. So it creates that high performing space. So we get that productivity increase when we're working with strengths. We're confident, we're energized, and of course, as a result of that, we feel motivated. We feel good when we're working with our strengths. It taps into our intrinsic motivation, the thing that internally motivates us. When we're working with strengths, it often gives us that sense of authenticity, trust, and safety, because again, we're sharing some detail about each other that is innate, natural preferences. We're getting to know each other at a deeper level and identifying how can we work together, collaborate together, work best together. And finally, it creates an ability to be agile. We can adapt, we can improve, we can innovate, because we're sharing our strengths and we can deploy them in different ways when we pivot, when we face challenges, and we can take advantage of opportunities. So just thinking about those benefits, what benefits do you think working with strengths would help for you and your team? And so, Mark, if you can introduce our poll, that'd be great.
Yeah, I've just opened the poll up, so you can answer this question. Tick all that apply. Comment in the chat about the linking up of the strengths and the energy is an interesting way of looking at it. And I think it was Shirley mentioned an epiphany, when that feeling of confidence actually helps validate that actually there's a strength there. I think, if I get that right, Shirley.
Great.
81%. Just give you a couple more. What we got? 83%. 3, 2, 1. Let's close the poll. and share results. So hopefully you can see those. So what we've got is, it's pretty, we've got a front one being motivated, being a benefit, and then second, close second, collaborative, and then equal third, productive, but actually all 4 areas being identified.
Yeah, fantastic. And of course, yeah, we're starting to understand that impact of working with strengths and see how they can really help you with your team and team performance. And there's some evidence to back this up, of course. So the work, as I say, around strengths probably started around the late 80s, early 90s, and the focus on strengths became more pronounced. And we've got some great research from the Corporate Leadership Council. I mean, it was done in 2002, but has since been validated. They looked at 19,000 managers and employees in different organisations, and their results indicated that when companies focus on managing performance through strengths optimisation, then performance rose by up to 36%. Whereas if we manage performance with a focus of developing weaknesses, which often is the case in our organisations, then this decreased performance by 27%. So quite a large disparity there. Later research by Gallup identified that employees who received strengths-based feedback improved their productivity by 36% and reduced absence by 11%. And some work conducted by the Strengths Partnership organisation showed a whopping 70% improvement on performance. So some quite amazing statistics. And I think other studies have shown that we have improved loyalty and engagement. People who receive recognition and encouragement of their strengths learn quicker, show higher levels of discretionary effort. And of course, I guess none of this comes as a surprise, because when we enjoy and we feel empowered by our work, we feel more satisfied and more productive. And another key benefit that I wanted to share with you, and it's becoming increasingly important in our world, in our society, is that impact of working with strengths on diversity and inclusion. When we start to value difference in teams, it starts to promote the sense of belonging and safety, which enables team members to feel able to contribute fully, feel fully included. And of course, what we're doing when we start to value strengths is really value uniqueness. Yeah, what strengths are we enabling our team to bring to the party? Yeah, we're making that conscious, explicit choice to value unique individual qualities, traits and behaviours in a positive way. So rather than what are they not bringing to the party, what are they bringing to the party? So thinking about both that demographic diversity, our lived experience, but also our cognitive diversity, which often can be less explicit. So valuing different styles of thinking, making associations, problem solving, and drawing conclusions. So really thinking about how we can make sure we build that inclusive environment where everyone feels valued by starting the conversations around strengths. What do we bring to this team? And there's lots of great resources on the NIHR Learn Academy pages. There's a whole module on this topic itself, building strength in the team. So for those of you that want to learn even more about it. And there's also a model on compassionate inclusive leadership, which again focuses how can we build that sense of inclusivity in our team. So we've got a great business case for working with strengths. So how do we start to identify our core strengths? The strengths for ourselves, how do we help our team members identify theirs? And there's a couple of ways we can do it. We can take online assessments. There's some that are free on the internet. There's some that you have to pay for to subscribe to. Or alternatively, you can do some self-reflection and feedback. So thinking about self-reflection, when do you feel competent, motivated, energized, and doing your great work? And here's some questions that perhaps can stimulate that thinking. So who's inspired you most? What particular career highlights have you had that have made you feel proud and good? Thinking about questions that can help you surface this feeling of motivation, energy, and doing great work. And finally, of course, you can seek feedback. So ask others about the times when they've seen you as competent, motivated, energized, and doing your great work. And what we tend to be looking for is really about 3 to 5 memorable standout strengths. I think any more than that might be hard to capture and keep a hold in our head when we've got so many other busy things that we're doing. And so, so looking for about 3 to 5 to recognise for yourself, and then maybe clarify or ratify with somebody else. So again, has anyone got any thoughts coming to mind? Have these questions stimulated anything for you? We'd love to start to hear about your core strengths, the things that you feel you're great at, or you have the potential to be great at, the things that energise you. So Mark, what's coming to mind for you? You've already mentioned a couple of yours. Any more?
Yeah, so the kinds of things I reflect on is developing others to be their best.
Yeah.
So it's delivery of results through other people, which really energizes me.
Yeah.
Mentioned empathy, strategic thinking, being flexible. Quite often get feedback about being flexible, and I think, well, I think a strength of mind is having a common sense, taking a common sense and pragmatic view of things.
Yeah, great. Some brilliant qualities there, and I would echo them all for sure as well. I've definitely seen those in our collaboration together. So great. Anything coming through the chat? Anything that people are identifying for themselves?
Oh, we've got networking being identified as a strength.
Great, yeah. Building those relationships for common good.
Yeah. Nothing else coming through at the moment. If anyone's got any others that spring to mind for them, please put them in the chat.
Great. So when we're thinking about this for ourselves, then how can we support our teams as well, of course? How can we help our teams work out theirs, and of course then go about sharing them with each other as a team? So we talked about getting feedback, and of course the team is a great place to start with that feedback, isn't it? Because they hopefully have seen those behaviours come through to be able to validate them, and we can validate them to some extent and then combine them to create a team map of strengths. So, you know, mapping it out on a virtual flip chart if we're working online, or on a kind of notice board. Where do those maps overlap? Where do we have team strengths that stand out? What gaps do we have as a team? And how does that impact on the way we work? So we're really thinking about it at 2 levels. We're thinking about how we can play to our individual strengths for the benefit of team goals, but we're also thinking about, as a combined team, what clear strengths does our team have? What clear strengths might impact on our performance? And again, we've got some questions here that help you bring this to life a little bit for your teams. You may be already thinking about your team and thinking about some of those clear strengths that come up for your team, and of course the gaps as well. So please feel free to add anything into chat. I've got an example though that I'll share with you to bring it to life a bit. And I was working with a university leadership team who had, when we looked at their strength map across the team, they had a real clear strength of creativity and a clear gap in results focus. So when we thought about what impact that had on their work and the way they worked, we recognised that their natural strength of creativity meant the team were able to really identify great opportunities for change and innovation. But given their gap in results focus, they had to put more energy and effort into keeping on track and delivering some of those creative ideas. So it wasn't that they couldn't execute, it was just they had to put much more effort and energy into it, Once the awareness had surfaced, they were able to put steps in place to help them keep on track. So they used a shared project and program planning tool that gave visibility across the team. They also identified one of their team members had a clear strength and asked them to kind of coordinate and support that coordination. And they developed some great habits in terms of helpful ways of working using the shared platform and agreeing a communications plan. And that really helped them stay connected and stay on track to deliver results. Okay, anything coming through the chat, Mark, that people have identified for either themselves or their teams?
We've got a few things actually, so let me just have a look up here. So Jenny talks about friendly, organised, pragmatic. Catherine, not micromanaging, giving people the flexibility and adapting to people's personal circumstances. Fantastic. Holly's a like-minded scientist, curious nature, with a determination to find a resolution, being a strength. What else have we got? Emma, others often, so the key thing is others often saying that you're creative, and creativity giving energy in both work and home life. So, you know, making things, doing art, then in the workplace, chairing collaborative meetings, get involved in creative tasks. So that's coming through strongly from Emma on that as a strength. Yeah. And Holly, being passionate about striving for success, making a difference between the workplace, love encouraging others to reach their potential. So that really resonates with me as well. So yeah, thanks everyone.
Great, thank you for sharing. And again, we're starting to see that really uniqueness of the core strengths coming through all those differences. So brilliant. We touched on gaps. I touched on gaps in that example. So whilst we're all about strengths, we're not neglectful of some of the gaps, and we do need to pay attention to our development areas. But we might want to think about doing that slightly differently. Yeah, thinking about our lens of development area as a potential performance risk. Yeah, so what is the gap having an impact on in terms of our performance? Is it impacting on our own performance, our team performance? And how can we mitigate that in a slightly different way maybe than we would normally think about development? So when we think about performance risks, we can identify them as two. Actually, we can look at our strengths and look at our gaps, if you like. So our strengths, sometimes we may use our strengths too much. We put them into overdrive. So they're used in the wrong way, too much, or in the wrong situation with the wrong people. So that can be one performance risk. Another performance risk can be around that energy draining example that I shared with you. Yeah, so the thing that creates that energy drain, the thing that we have to put much more effort and energy in. So how might we address these performance risks? Well, if we've got our strength in overdrive, the impact could be, and an example to share here would be, yeah, the team map shows that this team have got a great strength in decisiveness. Then the team may be almost too quick to execute and spend less time in the thinking stage using creativity to explore their best solutions. And so they're moving into decisiveness too quickly. So what we might want to do here is dial down that decisiveness, turn it down a bit, and recognize that actually we need to spend more time in the thinking stage. In performance risk elements, we're thinking about here the non-strengths and energy drainers, the things that we have to put much more effort into. Then we perhaps are going to have to use our strengths in a slightly different way to achieve that gap. We might look at bringing somebody in with that strength that can help us, or we might just have to learn it because it's something we have to do. So an example in this scenario would be a team show a gap in relational strengths, maybe empathy and compassion. So they're going to have to put much more energy and effort into working with a compassionate leadership style, something that is one of those key leadership approaches in NHS and healthcare research. And so how do we use that? How do we do that? How do we create more energy and effort into making that development shift? So Mark, just interested to see if you got an example of one of your core strengths that sometimes does go into overdrive for you.
I tend to overdrive all my core strengths. A couple of them might be, I mean, I love the strategic focus on things. So I think of strategically the bigger picture. That might mean if I overdo that, then I don't do the mundane stuff of actually having to put a plan in place and do the tactical, operational, day-to-day stuff as well, because that's less interesting for me. So I've got to be careful that I don't lose focus of that. The other one is if I'm too empathetic and I overdrive on that one, then I tend to discount myself. So what I find is that it's all about the other person, and actually I start to discount my own needs as well within that particular relationship. So that's another one that sometimes I can overdo.
Yeah, and I think as leaders, often that can be quite a challenge, can't it? When we've got a team that we're supporting our team, and we're not always supporting ourselves to keep ourselves in the best shape that we can be to help support them even more. Yeah. So again, it'd be great to hear from you if you've got any strengths in overdrive that you're thinking about that are coming to mind for you right now, seeing where you might be using that strength almost too much, and in some ways that's a more of a performance risk, and how might you dial that down. And whilst you're thinking about that, just wanting to share some techniques and tools to support how we manage our energy drainers and strengths. So we've already touched on them a little bit, but thinking about strength in overdrive, and maybe this is a team strength in overdrive where we're seeing a team doing too much of a particular strength. We took the previous example of a team that had a strength in decisiveness, maybe making those decisions too quickly. We dial that down. We pay more attention to the discussion and debate stage of our meeting. So we're dialing down that strength. We're recognizing we're using it, and we're dialing it down. Or maybe we've identified that we've got a team strength in critical thinking. So rather than worry too much about the decisiveness, we dial up our strength in critical thinking and draw on that strength to help us think through options and ways forward. So again, we're using a strength, an existing strength, but we're using it in a different way to overcome a performance risk. And of course, we can use that approach when we manage our energy drainers too. We can use our strengths differently to be able to help manage those energy drainers. So I mentioned about the university team we were working with, and they had someone on their team there that were really great on execution and completing tasks, and they took that kind of role for the team to keep that watching eye, making sure that the processes and procedures were being used, the team habits that had been developed were being used. So that was a way of using that strength differently. Thinking about another example of bringing in some additional support. If you haven't got anybody on your team with that natural innate strength, do we need to bring some specialist expertise in? So again, thinking about that example of moving to decisiveness too quickly, could we bring in a facilitator that's going to help us think more creatively, spend more time in that creative stage? And then of course, in those energy drainer impacts, the things where we know that there are critical parts of our work that we just have to do, and we have to learn it and develop it as a competency, even though it's not our favorite thing to do. By being aware, we can help support each other to develop those ways of working to ensure that the gaps are mitigated. So do we need to do some more formal learning? Do we need to challenge each other, coach each other in that new way of working? So again, we're recognizing there are potential performance risks, but we're perhaps managing them in a different way than we would do normally to achieve a better outcome. So Mark, anything come through in the chat in terms of these performance risks, whether they be strengths in overdrive or energy drainers?
A really good one from Catherine. So striving for perfection when sometimes good enough's okay and more realistic, especially to utilize time more appropriately and avoid burnout. So that's a really good one.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's again showing something that can be such an important asset to our work, can actually block us to some extent. Yeah. Anything else?
Emma says, I tend to dive into things like learning experientially, but often need to claw myself back to be a bit more analytical in planning tasks. I relate to borrowing strengths. Often I'll talk a plan through with somebody in the team who is strong at analysing more systematically. Brilliant example. Thanks, Emma.
Yeah, great, fantastic. So find those colleagues that have that innate strength, because if we can make sure that we're kind of allocating the roles and responsibilities to match those strengths, we're going to have a much more happy, satisfied, productive, energized team. So once we've kind of identified our individual core strengths, we've maybe mapped our team strengths, how do we go about really achieving strength in our team to be the best team we can be? And again, Strength Scope have helpfully developed a great framework for us to think about how we go about our own team's development. And this is what we call the peak performing pathway. So we can see from this model, there are the recognised aspects of peak performance, if you like, the pathway, the 5 A's that go around the outside of the model, the pathway. And in the centre of the model, we've got strengths and productive habits. So strength being the core energizers that really power up and boost performance, and productive habits being agreed ways of working that help us as a team work most effectively together, that address the strengths and help us stretch our strengths even more, and manage and you know, recognize some of those performance risks and help us manage and overcome the performance risks. So let's have a look at this model. In terms of the 5 A's, we'll go through each of those. So the first of the A's is aspiration. Yeah, so this is about what we're expecting to see in terms of the team's aspiration. Do they have clarity over the goal? Is the team's collective purpose clear, meaningful, and understood by all? And does the team have clear, measurable, collective goals that they need to achieve, and plans that are implemented to achieve those goals that support that purpose? And critically, is each team member clear on their own role, others' roles, and their expected contribution to the team's collective goals? So keeping that focus on collective purpose helps us manage some of the potential individual silo working we sometimes see on teams, keeping it a really collective and clear team focus. So that's what we're trying to achieve here. Then what we're looking at in terms of the next A is awareness. And awareness is, we would expect to see that the team members are encouraged and able to share their ideas and views openly and honestly at team meetings. As I mentioned before, we've got that inclusive approach where people have a sense of belonging and can fully contribute. Team members understand and trust each other's strengths. Yeah, so we've got that clear visibility of who is good at what, who is competent at what, in terms of not only that innate natural ability, but that energizing quality too. And that team members can rely on each other for help and support to get the job done. So when I do need to borrow a strength off a team member, they're going to be there for me. And likewise, I'm there for them. We've all got each other's back here, and we're able to support each other. The next A is action. So this is where we are recognizing we've now got our goals, we've got our clear roles and responsibilities, we've got a great understanding of each other in terms of strengths and how we can work best together. We're now wanting to take action, yeah. So we're wanting to make sure that we've got strong commitment to achieving high standards. We're going to encourage people to take full ownership of their own actions and results. So really developing that accountability. And it's not just about the leader holding the team to account, the team members to account, it's about the team holding each other to account. Yeah, they can hold each other accountable because everybody's committed, everybody's agreed, and we are knowing what is needed to be delivered. And when things aren't being met, we've got the confidence and trust in each other to be able to have those conversations. And that team members are totally confident that other team members will implement and play their part in the collective objective. And of course, sometimes some of those decisions that we're making as a team might be quite difficult to get to. We might have some debate about that, but knowing that's a good thing because we're going to be able to seek commitment through that and make sure that people are fully committed to the way forward, and recognising then that powerful quality of holding each other to account. So the fourth A, agility. And this is where we see that because, again, we've got that clear commitment, we've got that clear accountability, we've got that understanding of strengths and what we're setting out to achieve, that when we need to, we can be agile. We can seek out opportunities. We look at opportunities for us to take advantage of. And perhaps when we are facing challenges and problems, again, we're thinking more about them as potential opportunities than focusing in on the problem. We're looking for scanning the changes in environment. How can we best optimize those opportunities and improve as a team? We want to work hard to innovate, to identify solutions, and we want to work hard to help people when they have concerns about change, when they are resisting change, making sure that, first of all, we're fully aware of the potential reasons for resistance. It's something we need to pay attention to, but also enabling them to perhaps move forward through that change in a more positive way, because we know change can be difficult for people. So really creating that agile environment where we're focusing on strength, agility, opportunity and support when times are difficult. And of course, the final A, which is often the one that we sometimes neglect, is achievement. Yeah, as a team, we need to recognise and share successes and milestones, not just the big key milestones, but the milestones along the way. We need to celebrate points in the journey. We need to seek feedback on our performance from each other, from our research patients, from our participants, from our stakeholders. We need to be asking for feedback on performance. We need to be able to provide each other with constructive feedback to ensure that our team performance is continuously improving. And again, with that level of trust, we have the trust enough to perhaps have some conversations where we do need to give some developmental feedback, but it's all given with positive intent and focused on strengths. And we're continuously developing stretching collective goals. So we're looking at our team goals. We're back to that kind of team awareness stage where we're looking at the clear team goals and we're wanting to stretch and improve them. And so using these indicators as measures, we can check in how we're performing against each one. How can we stretch and develop our team working? So we've got another poll for you, and interested to hear, of these 5 A's, what do you feel your team is doing well at the moment?
Okay, poll's open.
Oh, thanks, Mark. Anything coming through on the chat that would be interesting to hear while we're waiting for the poll to be completed?
The only thing, another overdrive one was from Serena. So taking a lot of time to look at the details of something that can sometimes mean they get bogged down in the details and not move on quickly enough.
That's kind of a little bit related to the person that added the comment around perfectionism, isn't it? You know, sometimes we want it to be absolutely 100% correct when 95 might be okay. Yeah. Okay, what's coming through in terms of what are our teams doing well?
So we've got so probably achievement is heading the pack at the moment. So 79% of people have voted. So just give it a few more seconds. So if we get above 80%. Yeah. So 3, 2, 1, close the poll. And yeah, so what we've got is so 43%. So achievement and action being the top two, then agility, awareness, and aspirations being in last place there.
Right. So this is interesting, isn't it? Because often the feedback we get is achievement is sometimes forgotten about, and we're seeing this as the strength here. So that's brilliant, fantastic. Yeah. Obviously, when we're thinking about aspirations, that's perhaps one to take note of if we're not seeing that so well, because of course with aspiration, if we haven't got that clear direction, you know, thinking about our peak performance, we had clear direction, we had strengths and energizers, and we had competencies and experience. Yeah, if we haven't got that direction, we might not all be pulling in the same direction and working in the same way. So that's an interesting one. We've now got the next question, haven't we, Mark? So what's coming up here? So which is now, did you want to introduce this poll, Mark?
Yeah, so the title of it might look the same as the last poll, but the question is, which of these do you feel your team needs to improve? Okay, and the poll's open. So that's coming through.
Brilliant.
Nothing else in chat at the moment. So we've got aspirations and agility.
Yeah, okay. I guess will we have a mirror image of the previous question to some extent?
Okay, so just a few more seconds. Yes, have a couple more. Come on, don't be shy. Okay, 3, 2, 1. And we've got so aspirations being the top one, awareness, agility next, and then action and achievement. So it kind of fits with the previous one.
Yeah, and I guess as we mentioned, you know, we need to think about the balance of all of these 5 A's. How do we work on each of the A's to create that pathway to team performance? So again, what can we do to help manage and develop our team? By looking at those key measures, what we're expecting to see at each of those A's can give us the benchmark to be working towards. And as well, if you do access the module on NIHR Learn, there's some team climate checks supporting documentation for you to learn a little bit more about this model and help you improve your team working. So please do take a look on NIHR Learn on the Academy pages for the module. Okay, so I'm going to hand back to Mark just to summarise and close our session, and then we're going to look forward to hearing from you for any questions. Thank you.
That's great, thanks, Jo. So in summary, we have got so identifying the benefits of working with strengths and how this drives performance. I hope we've showed the benefits of that and how that can go. Also some exercises for you to use to identify your own individual and your team strengths. So it'd be great to hear after this webinar how that's gone. And we've had some great examples as well through the chat of folks who are really in tune with where they feel their strengths are, which is great. And also identifying where in overdrive or where there's a gap that it could have an impact. And finally, the framework that Jo shared as well to help you really optimize the individual and team strengths. So we hope you've got some tips or techniques or some takeaways from today's session. And with that, we have got if you get the deck that's sent out afterwards, the PDF, then there's links in here with all the references there. There was a question about where the data was around how those studies actually measured performance. So the links are in here to kind of follow up on those as well. So you can check those out yourself. And with that, I will hand over to Martine to see what we have on the Q&A.
So yes, so we do have some questions that have come up. And again, you still have time if anyone still wants to pop some anonymous questions in our Q&A. So shall I start off with the first question? So this one is, does this mean that we should be ignoring weaknesses in people we manage? This was a question that was asked earlier. So what if it is these are getting in the way of the person performing at their required level? If that made sense, if we're trying to explain that.
Yeah, and I think as we mentioned, it's, you know, we want to keep the focus on strength, and actually the literature and the studies say that we should be focusing 80% of our development activity on strengths and only 20% on weaknesses or development areas. So, you know, in terms of maximum performance, that would be what the theory shows. In reality, we do need to pay attention to our development areas, of course, and as I mentioned, we tend to call them performance risks, because for me it's about making sure that if we have a development area, it's something that we're going to invest development time in improving, it's something that's really going to add value. So does that development area create an impact on performance? And if so, do I therefore need to pay attention to it? And then how might I pay attention to it? Have I got another strength I can use to compensate? Could I borrow somebody else's strength? Could I, you know, work with somebody collaboratively, or delegate, or work with somebody else that's got that strength? Or do I need to learn it? Do I need to get comfortable with it? In which case, that's when we start to think about our development plan. But the critical question is, does it have an impact on the work that I'm doing, or the role perhaps that I aspire to do if we're thinking about development for the next level role?
Okay, thank you. So this was a question that was posed earlier, and it was asking about what it was meant by loyalty.
Ah, right. So we talked about inspiring loyalty. It's about engagement, I guess. So, you know, thinking about somebody who's coming to work every day, being valued for their strengths, feeling like they've got that sense of inclusivity, they're being valued for their own uniqueness, the thing they're bringing to the party, creates a sense of engagement. And so when we're engaged in an organisation, we'll have a greater sense of loyalty to that organisation.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So we have another one here then. So if we have some negative feedback for someone, for example, talking about poor timekeeping, how would we handle this? And or is some feedback just negative?
It's the yeah, quite interesting that the feedback. I mean, in my mind, feedback's feedback. It's how it's taken by the other person, as well as whether you feel it's negative or positive. But feedback is just feedback. So with that particular one, it's identifying where there is a gap, or there's something that needs to be addressed. Then the way of doing that is that it's about giving feedback about the impact of that on the team, on the individual, on yourself, making it as objective as possible. And that there are some online modules around having that courageous conversation, how to be able to give feedback, which may be difficult. But it's just a case of feedback is just feedback. It's how you give it in a way which helps the other person get better. So that person may not be identifying that poor timekeeping is a bad thing. They may feel their timekeeping is a real strength for them. It's important to give the feedback that actually it's had a negative impact, so that individual can then do something about it.
Yeah, I think it's all about the positive intent that you're sharing the feedback with. Yeah, so you're sharing feedback to help somebody improve. And so by being really clear at the beginning, that's what you're having the conversation about can set the tone for the conversation. And I think it's it brings out a really important point around strengths and giving feedback. We have a natural negativity bias as human beings, yeah. So when we are looking at our performance, we'll go to the negative first, we'll go to the development areas first. When we're looking, maybe when we remember back to looking at our school reports or our kids' school reports, we look at the lower scores first, we're drawn to negativity. Likewise with feedback, if we've had a bad experience of feedback and we hear the word feedback, we're going to think, oh my God, what's coming next? You know, what's somebody going to tell me? So we've got this natural negativity bias. So we do have to be aware of that and try and reframe what we're hearing and help people reframe what they're listening to focus on the positive. And it's a natural, innate thing that our brain does to protect our survival, if you like, from a primitive, you know, going back to our primitive brain. So by being aware of that and helping ourselves to think more positively about feedback and using a strengths-based approach can really help you build that positivity rather than focusing on the negative.
A really good other question, Kate, or a comment. Somewhere I worked previously referred to feedback as feed forward.
Yes.
Brilliant.
Nice.
Yeah, I really like that.
Yeah. And we're going to be doing a webinar about feedback as well, aren't we? So stay tuned. How to give great feedback. Yeah.
So we just have one more question then. So in terms of performance risk, or is the term performance risk a negative one?
Well, I suppose it could be, couldn't it? Yeah, it could be. But I think for me, it's the thing that performance risk talks about rather than development area or weakness, whichever term you choose. The thing about performance risk is it draws your attention to the fact that this development need has an impact on performance. Yeah, and that's the critical question we have to ask ourselves, because often when we talk about what are our development needs, we talk about things that we're not very good at, but we then don't relate it to the work that we do. So I know I'm not great at, you know, budgets and detail. I have had to put a lot of effort into that and I've got okay at it. But you know what? If I can, I will delegate that to somebody who is really good at it, because it's something that, whilst it's important, it's not the core thing that I do. So I can afford to delegate it more or as I say, put more effort in when I need to, when it's really important.
Yeah. Yep, we have no more questions in our Q&A box.
Okay, well, it's been brilliant to hear from everybody. Thank you for sharing your chats and insights and questions. I've really enjoyed having that interaction, so really appreciate it. Thank you.
So I'd just like to say thank you once again for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.